I never thought I'd spend my Saturday morning dealing with someone measuring my driveway with a tape measure. But here we are. Let me back up a bit. After 25 years working as a detective chief with the city police department, my wife and I finally bought our dream home in Willow Creek. It's one of those nice subdivisions with neat lawns, 2-story houses, and an HOA that promises to keep everything looking perfect. We were excited about the fresh start, the good schools for our teenage daughter, and honestly, just having a quiet place to unwind after all those years of dealing with the worst of humanity. But before we could really settle in, we needed to get rid of stuff. You know how it is when you move. You open boxes and think, why did we even pack this? Old furniture that doesn't fit the new place, kitchen gadgets we never used, my daughter's toys from when she was little, books we'd read 100 times. The garage was packed with things that deserved a second life with someone who'd actually use them. So I decided to have a garage sale. Simple enough, right? I checked the HOA rules online, filled out the form, posted it on the community board 3 days in advance like they required, and set everything up on Saturday morning. Tables on my driveway, prices marked clearly, a cash box ready to go. My wife made lemonade. Our daughter was excited to sell her old bike and make some money. It felt like a normal suburban Saturday. The sale started at 8 in the morning and people actually showed up. Our neighbors were friendly, stopping by to introduce themselves and browse. A young couple bought our old coffee table. Someone's kid was thrilled to get a box of action figures. I was thinking, this is great, we're meeting people and clearing out the garage at the same time. Then she showed up. I noticed her walking down the street around 9:30, moving with purpose. She was probably in her late 50s, wearing a white blouse that looked like it had been ironed that morning, khaki pants with a crease sharp enough to cut paper, and sunglasses that probably cost more than everything on my tables combined. But what really caught my attention was the clipboard. She was carrying it like a weapon. She walked right past the customers browsing and came straight to me. Didn't introduce herself, didn't say good morning. Just started looking around with her lips pressed into a thin line. I could feel the temperature drop about 10 degrees. Good morning, I said, trying to be friendly. Can I help you find something? She looked at me like I'd just asked her to eat dirt. I'm Patricia, the HOA compliance officer for this section. I've received reports about this sale. Reports? We'd been open for 90 minutes. Who reports a garage sale 90 minutes after it starts? Oh well, everything's been approved, I said, keeping my tone easy. I filed the paperwork on Wednesday, posted the notice, followed all the guidelines in the handbook. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Of my tables, of the items for sale, of my driveway. She even took a picture of the price stickers. The guidelines state that all sale items must remain on the property owner's driveway, she said, not looking at me. Your tables appear to be extending beyond the permitted boundary. I looked at my tables. They were definitely on my driveway, not even close to the sidewalk. Ma'am, I'm pretty sure everything's within the boundary. The driveway ends right there, and the tables are a good 2 feet inside it. That's when she pulled out an actual tape measure from her bag. I'm not making this up. She got down on her knees in her pressed khakis and started measuring from the edge of my driveway to the sidewalk, then to my tables. A couple who'd been looking at some picture frames slowly backed away toward their car. 2.3 inches, she announced, standing up and brushing invisible dirt from her knees. Your merchandise table is 2.3 inches beyond the approved boundary line. I glanced at my wife, who was standing by the lemonade with her mouth slightly open. Our daughter had stopped arranging books and was watching with wide eyes. I really don't think 2 inches is... I started, but she cut me off. The rules are the rules. They exist for a reason. If we let everyone bend them just a little bit, chaos follows. Surely you understand that. She said it like she was explaining gravity to a child. Look, I'm happy to move the table back a few inches if it's really an issue, I offered, trying to keep the peace. Too late for that now. The violation has been documented. She tapped her clipboard with her pen. I'm also noting excessive traffic disturbance. There have been at least 12 vehicles on this street in the past hour, and one of them blocked the Johnson's mailbox for approximately 45 seconds. 12 vehicles on a street in an hour seemed pretty normal to me. But what did I know? I'd only spent my entire career responding to actual disturbances. Additionally, she continued, warming to her topic, the Aesthetic Standards Clause clearly indicates that all displayed items must be clean, organized, and not create a visual blight on the community. Some of these items appear worn, They're used items, I said, feeling my patience starting to fray. That's what a garage sale is. Used doesn't have to mean shabby. She made a note on her clipboard. I'm also concerned about the commercial nature of this activity. The HOA permits garage sales for the purpose of personal decluttering, not as ongoing business ventures. This is my first garage sale. I moved in 2 weeks ago. She ignored that completely. You'll be receiving formal notification of these violations within 3 business days. The board will review the matter and determine appropriate penalties. Fines typically start at $500 for first-time offenses, though they can be higher depending on severity. $500? For selling my used coffee table and some old books? My wife walked over, trying the diplomatic approach. I'm sure we can work this out. We're new to the neighborhood and we really want to be good neighbors. If we made a mistake with the setup, we apologize. Patricia looked at her like she'd just offered her a handful of worms. The time for apologies was before the violations occurred. Good day. She turned and walked away, her phone already at her ear. I could hear her saying something about documenting multiple infractions as she headed down the street. The couple who'd been looking at the picture frames drove away without buying anything. Another neighbor who'd been walking over saw Patricia leaving and suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. The cheerful Saturday morning vibe evaporated like water on hot concrete. What just happened? Our daughter asked. I honestly wasn't sure. I dealt with a lot of difficult people in my career, but this was something else. This was personal offense taken at the existence of a garage sale. I think we just met the neighborhood watch commander, I said, trying to make light of it. But I noticed something as Patricia disappeared around the corner. 3 different neighbors were watching from their windows. One of them, an older lady across the street, caught my eye and gave me a small shake of her head like she was saying, "Yeah, we know. We're sorry." That's when I realized this probably wasn't about my garage sale at all. This was about something bigger. And my detective instincts, the ones I thought I'd left at the office, started humming in the back of my mind. The sale continued, but the damage was done. We made about $150, gave away most of the rest to people who showed up late and packed up by noon. As I folded up the tables, I couldn't help thinking about that tape measure and those photos and the way Patricia had said the rules are the rules. I'd spent my whole career working with rules. I knew the difference between rules that protected people and rules that controlled them. And I had a feeling I was about to learn a lot more about which kind Willow Creek was dealing with. Monday morning started with a knock on the door at 7:30. I was still in my robe, drinking coffee and enjoying the fact that I didn't have to rush to the precinct. Retirement was supposed to mean slow mornings, right? Wrong. The mail carrier handed me a certified letter. Thick envelope, official looking, return address from the Willow Creek HOA Management Company. My wife looked over my shoulder as I signed for it. That was fast, she said. I opened it right there in the doorway. 5 pages, 5 actual pages about a garage sale. The first page was the formal complaint, written in language so dramatic you'd think I'd been running a black market operation out of my garage. Unauthorized commercial activity, violation of aesthetic standards, failure to maintain property boundaries, creating traffic hazards that blocked emergency access routes. Emergency access routes? I read out loud. I was selling a coffee table, not parking a semi-truck across the street. The second page listed the violations with corresponding sections from the HOA handbook. The third page outlined the fine structure. $500 for the boundary violation, $300 for aesthetic violations, $200 for traffic disturbance, $1,000 total. My wife grabbed the letter from my hand. This is insane. They can't actually charge us $1,000 for having a garage sale. They're trying to, I said. The fourth page was a timeline for payment and appeals. I had 14 days to either pay the fine or request a hearing with the board. The fifth page was signed by Patricia and 2 other board members, with a note at the bottom saying failure to comply could result in a lien being placed on our property. I sat down at the kitchen table and read through it again, slower this time. Something felt off. Not just wrong or unfair, but actually off. The language was too aggressive, too detailed. Too much like someone who'd done this exact thing many times before. After my wife left for work and our daughter headed to school, I did what any retired detective would do. I started digging. Not officially, just curious, or at least that's what I told myself. First, I called the HOA Management Company. A tired-sounding woman named Helen answered. "I'm calling about a violation notice I received," I said. "Property address?" I gave it to her. I heard typing. Oh, another one from Patricia. Yes, I see it here in the system. Another one. Interesting word choice. How does the appeals process work? I asked. You can request a hearing with the board. They meet the third Thursday of every month. You'd present your case, Patricia would present hers, and the board votes. Has anyone ever won an appeal against one of Patricia's complaints? Long pause. More typing. Sir, I can't really discuss other residents' cases. I'm not asking for names. I'm asking if the appeals process actually works. Another pause. In my 3 years here, I've processed 49 complaints filed by Patricia. 7 went to appeals. None were overturned. 49 complaints in 3 years. I thanked Helen and hung up. Next, I did something I probably shouldn't have, but old habits die hard. I pulled up the subdivision property records online. Public information, completely legal. I started looking at ownership history, transfer dates, anything that might tell me about the neighborhood. Then I took a walk. Just a casual stroll around the block, the kind new neighbors do when they're getting to know the area, except I was paying attention to details. I noticed things, like the house 3 doors down had a mailbox that was painted cream instead of the standard white. The house across the street had a small garden gnome partially hidden behind a bush. 2 houses over, someone had installed a doorbell camera that was a different brand than the approved list mentioned in the HOA guidelines. All minor things. All technically violations if someone wanted to be difficult about it. I found myself standing in front of a house with a beautifully maintained yard. An older woman was watering her flowers. This was the same woman who'd shaken her head at me from her window during the garage sale. Your roses are gorgeous, I said. She looked up, smiled cautiously. Thank you. I'm Linda. You're the new family, right? The garage sale folks? That's us. I'm sorry if we caused any disturbance on Saturday. She set down her watering can and walked closer to the property line. Looked left and right like she was checking for spies. Honey, you didn't cause any disturbance. That was all Patricia being Patricia. Don't let her bully you. Has she always been like this? Linda laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Oh, you have no idea. When we first moved here 8 years ago, she reported us for hanging our Christmas lights 2 days before the approved date. 2 days. The fine was $300. Did you pay it? We did. We were new. We didn't know any better. But let me tell you, it didn't stop there. She reported my husband for washing his car on a Tuesday instead of a weekend. Said the water runoff was creating drainage issues. Another $200. She reported our son for riding his skateboard on the sidewalk. Said it was creating noise pollution and safety hazards. $150. I felt my jaw tightening. That's harassment. That's Patricia. You know the Hendersons? Nice young family, 2 little kids. They moved out 6 months ago. Sold at a loss because they couldn't take it anymore. Patricia reported them 17 times in 2 years. Their kids drew hopscotch squares with sidewalk chalk on their own driveway, and she called it vandalism. Why doesn't anyone stop her? Linda shrugged. She's on the board. Has been for years. The other board members are either scared of her or don't want to deal with the drama. Most people just pay the fines and try to stay under her radar. The ones who fight back usually end up moving. How many families has she driven out? In the 8 years I've been here? At least 12 that I know of. Probably more. I thanked Linda and continued my walk, but my mind was racing. 12 families. 49 complaints in 3 years. A pattern of harassment masked as rule enforcement. This wasn't about keeping the neighborhood nice. This was about power and control. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started searching HOA records. In our state, HOA finances are public record. Board meeting minutes are supposed to be available to residents. I found the Willow Creek HOA portal and started reading. The meeting minutes were sparse, mostly just attendance and votes on various issues. But I noticed something interesting. Patricia had been listed as a board member for 6 years, but I couldn't find any record of an election for her position. I went back through every annual meeting summary. Other positions showed election results. Patricia's position never did. Then I started looking at the financial reports. Quarterly statements showing income from HOA dues and expenses for maintenance, landscaping, insurance, the usual stuff. But some of the vendor names caught my attention. Green Valley Landscaping, Summit Property Maintenance, Clearwater Pressure Washing. I pulled up the state business registry. Green Valley Landscaping had been registered 2 years ago, but the business license had lapsed after 6 months. Summit Property Maintenance didn't exist in the registry at all. Clearwater Pressure Washing had an address listed that When I looked it up, turned out to be a UPS store mailbox. My detective instincts weren't just humming anymore. They were practically screaming. I spent the next hour cross-referencing payments to these vendors. Green Valley had received $12,000 over 18 months. Summit had gotten $15,000. Clearwater, $8,000. $35,000 paid to companies that either didn't exist or weren't properly licensed. Then I found something that made me sit back in my chair. The registered agent for Green Valley Landscaping, back when it was briefly legitimate, was someone named Connor Holbrook. I searched the name with Willow Creek. Connor Holbrook, son of Patricia Holbrook, according to a 5-year-old. Facebook post from a neighborhood barbecue. Wife came home and found me surrounded by printed documents and spreadsheets. Please, tell me you're not going full detective mode over a garage sale. Fine, she said. It's not about the garage sale anymore, I said. I think Patricia has been embezzling from the HOA. She sat down next to me. Are you sure? Sure enough to keep looking. These vendor payments don't add up. The companies aren't real, and one of them traces back to her son. What are you going to do? Good question. I couldn't just storm into the next board meeting and make accusations. I needed more proof. I needed to document everything carefully, legally, the same way I'd build any financial crimes case. I'm going to request all the HOA financial records for the past 3 years, I said. As a resident, I have that right, and I'm going to attend the next board meeting. You're going to fight this. I'm going to finish what she started when she decided to measure my driveway with a tape measure. My wife smiled. She really picked the wrong house, didn't she? She really did. That night I sent a formal email requesting copies of all financial records, vendor contracts, and payment receipts for the previous 3 years. I cited the specific state laws that required HOAs to provide this information to residents. By Wednesday, I had a response from Helen at the management company. The records would be ready for pickup by Friday. By Thursday, I had an email from Patricia herself. Subject line, regarding your records request. The message was short. Your request for financial records has been noted. However, the board must review such requests to ensure they serve a legitimate purpose and are not intended to harass board members performing their volunteer duties. We will respond within the legally required time frame. I smiled at my screen. That response told me everything I needed to know. If there was nothing to hide, she'd have just sent the records. Instead, she was stalling, which meant I was right. And now she knew someone was looking. The game had officially begun. Friday afternoon, I drove to the HOA management office to pick up the records. Helen met me at the front desk with 3 banker boxes full of files. This is everything from the past 3 years, she said, lowering her voice. Patricia called 4 times this week asking why we were releasing these to you. I told her state law requires it, but she wasn't happy. I appreciate you following the law, I said. She hesitated, then leaned in closer. Look, I'm not supposed to say anything, but you seem like a decent person. Be careful. Patricia has a way of making life very difficult for people who cross her. The last person who questioned the finances ended up with weekly violation notices for 6 months straight, until they gave up and moved. I've dealt with difficult people before, I said. But thank you for the warning. I loaded the boxes into my car and drove home. My wife took one look at the boxes and sighed. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. I set up a workspace in our home office and started going through everything systematically. Bank statements, vendor invoices, payment receipts, contracts, meeting minutes. I organized it all by date and category, the same way I'd organize evidence for any investigation. The first thing I noticed was that the landscaping bills were insanely high. According to the invoices from Green Valley Landscaping, they were charging $4,000 a month for basic lawn maintenance of the common areas. I drove around the subdivision looking at these common areas. There were exactly 3 small patches of grass totaling maybe half an acre, a couple of flower beds at the entrance, and some shrubs along the main road. Maybe an hour of work for a 2-person crew, twice a month. I called 3 local landscaping companies and asked for quotes on the same work. The highest quote I got was $800 a month. Green Valley was charging 5 times the market rate. Summit Property Maintenance was even worse. They supposedly handled general repairs and maintenance, but the invoices were vague. Things like emergency repair consultation for $2,000, structural assessment for $1,500, Safety compliance review for $3,000. No details about what was actually done. No photos, no material receipts. Just generic descriptions and big price tags. I spent the entire weekend going through the records. My wife brought me coffee and sandwiches while I worked. Our daughter peeked in a few times, curious about what had her dad so focused. "Is this about that mean lady from the garage sale?" she asked. "Sort of," I said. "It's about making sure everyone's playing fair." By Sunday night, I had a spreadsheet with every suspicious payment highlighted. The total was $52,000 over 3 years. $52,000 that had essentially disappeared into fake companies and questionable charges. But I needed more than just suspicious invoices. I needed proof that these companies didn't do the work they claimed, or better yet, that they didn't exist at all. Monday morning, I started making calls. I contacted the state contractor licensing board and verified that none of these companies had valid licenses. I called the addresses listed on the invoices. One disconnected number. One went to a residential house where a confused elderly man said he'd never heard of Summit Property Maintenance. And one went to that UPS store mailbox I'd found earlier. Then I did something I'd done 1,000 times as a detective. I followed the money. Bank records showed that payments to Green Valley Landscaping were deposited into an account. Then within days, large cash withdrawals were made. The account holder was listed as Connor Holbrook. I sat back and stared at my screen. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping or inflated prices. This was fraud. Patricia was creating fake companies, approving payments to those companies, and her son was cashing the checks. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? This is Robert Chen. I live 2 streets over from you. Linda gave me your number. She said you might be looking into some HOA issues." "I might be," I said carefully. "Can we meet? There's something I think you should know." 20 minutes later, Robert was sitting in my living room. He was maybe 40, worked in city planning according to what Linda had told me, and he looked nervous. "I've wanted to do something about Patricia for 2 years, he said, "but I've got a family and I couldn't risk the harassment. When Linda told me you were asking questions, I thought maybe someone finally had the courage to stand up to her." "What do you know? Patricia's been on the board for 6 years. But here's the thing. There's never been an election for her position. She basically appointed herself to fill a vacancy and then just stayed there. According to the HOA bylaws, board positions are supposed to be elected every 2 years. She's avoided 3 election cycles by manipulating the meeting schedules and claiming there weren't enough volunteers. Can you prove that?" He pulled out a folder. "I've been documenting everything. Meeting notices, minutes, bylaw violations. I'm in city planning, so I know how this stuff is supposed to work. Our HOA isn't following its own rules, and Patricia's the reason why." I looked through his documentation. It was thorough, detailed, and it showed a clear pattern of Patricia controlling the board by preventing proper elections and intimidating anyone who might challenge her. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "Because Linda said you were some kind of investigator or something before you retired, and because I can't do this alone. Patricia knows I work in planning, so she's been extra careful with me. Last time I raised questions at a board meeting, I got violation notices for my kid's basketball hoop being 2 feet too close to the street. Cost me $400 and I had to move it. My kids were 8 and 10. That's petty and cruel. That's Patricia. So can you do anything with this?" I thought about it. I had financial fraud. Robert had governance violations. Together, we had a case that showed Patricia had been running the HOA like her personal kingdom, while stealing thousands of dollars from her neighbors. "Yeah," I said. "I can do something with this. The next board meeting is Thursday night, right?" "Right, 7 o'clock at the community center. I'll be there. And I'll be bringing some interesting reading material." After Robert left, I spent the rest of the day preparing. I printed out summaries of the fraudulent payments. I created a timeline of Patricia's unauthorized tenure on the board. I documented every piece of evidence clearly and organized it so anyone could follow along. Tuesday morning, I got another certified letter. This one informed me that my appeal of the garage sale violations had been denied by the board, and I now had 7 days to pay the $1,000 fine or face additional penalties, including a lien on my property. I called my old partner from the police department, Mike. He'd moved to the Financial Crimes Division 5 years ago. "I need some advice," I said. "Unofficial, just between friends." "What kind of advice?" I explained the situation. The fake companies, the payments, the pattern of fraud. Mike listened without interrupting. "You've got enough for us to open an investigation," he said when I finished. "But here's my advice. Document everything you found. Present it to the HOA board first. Give them a chance to handle it internally. If they don't, or if Patricia tries to retaliate, then bring it to us officially. That way you're protected and you're doing it by the book." That's what I was thinking. "And hey," Mike added, "be careful. People who steal money usually don't stop at just theft. If she feels cornered, she might do something stupid." "I've dealt with desperate people before." "Yeah, but not in your own neighborhood. Not while your family lives there. Just watch your back." Wednesday night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the families Patricia had driven out. All the petty violations and harassment. All the money she'd stolen from people who were just trying to have a nice place to live. My wife found me sitting in the kitchen at 2 a.m. "You're nervous," she said. Little. You've testified in court dozens of times. You've confronted armed suspects. Why are you nervous about a HOA meeting?" "Because in court there are rules. There's a judge. There's a process. Tomorrow night I'm walking into Patricia's domain. She controls that board. She's been doing this for 6 years. I'm just the new guy who had a garage sale." My wife squeezed my shoulder. "You're not just the new guy. You're the detective chief who spent 25 years taking down people who thought they were untouchable. Patricia's about to learn that measuring driveways with a tape measure was the biggest mistake she ever made." Thursday morning, I loaded all my documentation into my briefcase. Every invoice, every bank record, every piece of evidence I'd collected. I made copies of everything, just in case. At 6:30, my wife and I drove to the community center. I expected a small meeting room, maybe a handful of people. Instead, the parking lot was packed. "What's going on?" my wife asked. We walked inside and found the meeting room filled with at least 40 people. Linda was there. Robert was there with his wife. People I'd never met were sitting in folding chairs, standing against the walls waiting. Linda came over to us. Word got around that someone was finally standing up to Patricia. A lot of us wanted to be here to see it. I looked around the room. I saw hope in people's faces, and fear. Fear that this might not work. Fear that Patricia would find a way to win like she always did. At the front of the room, Patricia sat at a table with 2 other board members. She saw me walk in and her expression didn't change. But I noticed her jaw tighten. She knew why I was there. She had no idea what was coming. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. Her voice was crisp and professional, like this was just another routine board meeting, like there weren't 40 people crammed into a room that usually held 15. "Good evening, everyone. I see we have quite a turnout tonight." She looked directly at me when she said it. "We'll begin with the standard agenda items. First, approval of last month's minutes." One of the other board members, a quiet man named Jeff, raised his hand. "Patricia, I think we should address the crowd first. A lot of people are here for a reason. We follow the agenda, Jeff. That's how proper meetings are conducted." A woman in the back called out, "We're here about the violations and the fines. We want answers." Patricia's smile was thin and cold. "If residents have concerns, they can submit them in writing according to the proper procedures. This meeting has an agenda and we will follow it." I stood up. Every eye in the room turned to me. "Point of order," I said, using the formal language I knew she couldn't ignore. "According to Robert's Rules of Order, which this HOA claims to follow, any resident can raise a point of personal privilege that relates to the rights of the assembly." "I'm invoking that right." Patricia's face tightened. "You're out of order. Sit down." "Actually, I'm not. And if you try to silence me, everyone in this room will know that this board doesn't actually follow its own rules. So I suggest you let me speak." The room went completely silent. Jeff and the other board member, a woman named Beverly, both looked uncomfortable. Patricia's knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. "You have 3 minutes," she said. "I'll need more than that. 3 minutes or nothing." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Then I'll make this quick. 2 weeks ago, Patricia reported me for having a garage sale. She claimed I violated multiple HOA rules and issued a $1,000 fine. But while reviewing the documentation for my appeal, I noticed something interesting. So I requested the HOA's financial records for the past 3 years. I held up the first document. These records show payments to 3 companies: Green Valley Landscaping, Summit Property Maintenance, and Clearwater Pressure Washing. Total payments over 3 years, $52,000. People started murmuring. Patricia's face had gone from tight to pale. Here's the interesting part, I continued. None of these companies have valid business licenses in our state. None of them have websites. None of them have business phone numbers. 2 of them have addresses that don't exist or lead to mailbox stores. I pulled out another document. Green Valley Landscaping is registered to Connor Holbrook, Patricia's son. The payments to this company were deposited into an account in his name, and within days large cash withdrawals were made. The murmuring got louder. Beverly leaned over to Patricia and said something I couldn't hear. Patricia ignored her. "You're making wild accusations without proof," Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "I have bank records. I have invoices. I have documentation from the State Contractor Licensing Board showing these companies don't exist. I have testimony from actual landscaping companies saying the work described in these invoices is worth maybe a fifth of what was paid. This isn't an accusation, Patricia. This is evidence." I placed a stack of papers on the table in front of the board. But the financial fraud is only part of the problem. Patricia has been on this board for 6 years without a single election. According to the HOA bylaws, board positions must be elected every 2 years. She's avoided 3 election cycles by manipulating meeting schedules and preventing nominations. Robert stood up from his seat. "I can confirm that. I've been documenting the bylaw violations for 2 years. Patricia has been running this HOA illegally." Jeff picked up the papers I'd placed on the table and started reading. His face went from confused to shocked to angry in about 30 seconds. "Patricia, is this true?" he asked. "Are these companies real?" "This is a witch hunt," Patricia said, standing up. "This man moves into our community and immediately starts causing problems. He violated our rules and now he's trying to deflect by attacking me personally." "Answer the question," Beverly said quietly. "Are these companies real?" Patricia grabbed her bag. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted. This meeting is adjourned." "You can't adjourn the meeting," Jeff said. "I'm calling for an emergency vote to suspend your position on the board pending an investigation. You don't have the authority. I'm a board member. I absolutely have the authority." "Beverly, do you second the motion?" Beverly looked at Patricia, then at the crowd, then at the papers in front of her. "I second the motion." Patricia's face went from pale to red. "You can't do this to me. I've given 6 years to this community. I've maintained standards. I've kept property values high. You've stolen from us," someone shouted from the crowd. "You drove my family out of our home," another voice called. Linda stood up. "You fined me $900 over 2 years for petty nonsense. My husband washed his car on the wrong day. My son rode his skateboard. My Christmas lights went up 2 days early. You've been bullying this neighborhood for years and we've all been too scared to stop you." More people started standing, sharing their stories. The family who got reported for their kids' chalk drawings. The couple who paid $400 because their mailbox was the wrong shade of white. The single mom who got reported for having her trash can visible from the street on a non-collection day. Patricia looked around the room, and for the first time I saw something other than confidence in her eyes. I saw panic. "This is mob mentality," she said, but her voice shook. "You're all ganging up on me because one person made some accusations." "They're not accusations," Jeff said, still reading through the documents. "These are bank records. These are state licensing documents. Patricia, did you approve payments to companies owned by your son?" Patricia grabbed her papers and shoved them into her bag. "I'm calling my lawyer. You'll all regret this. The only person who needs a lawyer is you," I said calmly. "Because tomorrow morning, I'm referring this case to the Financial Crimes Division of the Police Department. I'm also filing a complaint with the State HOA Regulatory Board, and I'm recommending that the HOA hire a forensic accountant to audit the past 6 years of finances." "You can't prove anything," Patricia said, but she was already moving toward the door. "I was a detective chief for 25 years, I said. I specialized in financial crimes for the last 8. I know exactly what I can prove, and I know how to build a case that will hold up in court." Patricia stopped at the door and turned back. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. I have connections. I have lawyers. I will bury you." "No, Patricia. You buried yourself. The day you decided to measure my driveway with a tape measure, you made a mistake. You picked on someone who knows how to fight back. And more importantly, you picked on someone who won't let you hurt anyone else." She stared at me for a long moment, then walked out. The door slammed behind her, the room erupted. People were talking, some were crying, some were hugging each other. Jeff and Beverly sat at the table looking shell-shocked. Jeff finally stood up. "I think we need to have a serious discussion about the future of this board. But first, I move that we immediately void all pending fines issued by Patricia in the past 6 months pending review." "Seconded," Beverly said. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up. Motion passes. I also move that we hire an independent auditor to review all HOA finances for the past 6 years. Seconded. All in favor? Again, every hand up. Jeff looked at me. "Would you be willing to help us understand what we're looking at here? Not as a board member, but as someone who knows what they're doing." "I'll help however I can," I said. "But my main concern is making sure Patricia faces consequences for what she's done. This isn't just about HOA money. This is about all the families she's hurt." Linda came over and hugged me. "Thank you. You have no idea how long we've been waiting for someone to stand up to her. I'm sorry it took someone new to do it." "Don't be sorry. You did what none of us had the courage to do." My wife squeezed my hand as we walked to the car later that night. The meeting had gone on for 2 more hours with people sharing stories and the remaining board members trying to figure out how to clean up the mess. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired, but good. That woman has been terrorizing people for years. At least now it stops." "Do you think she'll actually face criminal charges? If the evidence holds up the way I think it will?" "Yeah. Embezzlement, fraud, possibly extortion, depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be. She's looking at serious prison time. All because she couldn't leave a garage sale alone," I laughed. "All because she thought she was untouchable. That's always the mistake. People get away with something small, then something bigger, then something bigger. Eventually, they believe their own myth. They think they're too smart, too connected, too powerful to get caught. But everyone makes mistakes, and everyone leaves evidence." When we got home, our daughter was waiting up. "Did you get the bad lady?" she asked. "Yeah, sweetie. We got her." "Good. She was mean." After she went to bed, I sat down at my computer and started writing a formal report. Everything I'd found, everything I'd documented, laid out clearly for the Financial Crimes Division. I sent it to Mike with a note saying I was officially referring the case. He called me 10 minutes later. "This is solid work," he said. "We'll open an investigation tomorrow. I have a feeling Patricia's going to have a very bad week. She earned it. You know she's going to come after you, right? People like this don't go down quietly. Let her try." I spent 25 years dealing with criminals who were a lot scarier than an HOA board member with a tape measure. I hung up and looked at the $1,000 fine letter still sitting on my desk. Tomorrow I'd frame it. A reminder that sometimes standing up to bullies starts with something as simple as refusing to be intimidated. And sometimes justice starts with a garage sale. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Mike and his team from Financial Crimes opened an official investigation the morning after the board meeting. They subpoenaed bank records, interviewed board members, and tracked down every payment Patricia had approved over the past 6 years. The forensic accountant the HOA hired found even more than I had. Turns out the $52,000 I'd discovered was just the beginning. Patricia had been skimming money through inflated vendor payments, fake reimbursements for supplies that were never purchased, and phantom consulting fees for work that was never done. The total came to over $78,000. On a Tuesday morning, 2 detectives showed up at Patricia's house with a warrant. I wasn't there, obviously. Mike told me about it later. He said she tried to play the victim, claiming she was being persecuted for doing her job. She called her lawyer. She threatened lawsuits, but when they showed her the evidence, the bank records showing deposits to her son's account, and the cash withdrawals, she went quiet. They arrested her on 6 counts of embezzlement, 4 counts of fraud, and 2 counts of filing false documents. Her bail was set at $50,000. She posted it the same day. The neighborhood was buzzing. People who'd been scared of Patricia for years suddenly felt free to talk. At the community center, at the grocery store, at the park, everywhere I went, someone wanted to share their story. The woman who'd gotten fined for having a bird feeder that was too visible from the street. The man who'd been reported for parking his work van in his own driveway overnight. The retired couple who'd received violation notices for their lawn being a 1/4 inch too long. The HOA board called an emergency election. Robert ran for Patricia's seat and won by a landslide. One of his first actions was to review every fine Patricia had issued in the past 3 years. They voided about 60% of them, finding that most were either completely fabricated or blown way out of proportion. My $1,000 garage sale fine? Voided, along with a formal apology from the board. The criminal case took 6 months to wind through the system. Patricia's lawyer tried everything. He claimed the payments were legitimate. He said the HOA's accounting was sloppy, and Patricia was being blamed for other people's mistakes. He argued that the evidence was circumstantial, but Mike's team had done their homework. They tracked the money from the HOA account to Patricia's son's account, to cash withdrawals that coincided with large purchases Patricia made. New car, home renovations, a vacation to Europe, all funded by money stolen from her neighbors. In the end, Patricia took a plea deal. She pled guilty to felony embezzlement and fraud. The prosecutor recommended 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of $78,000. The day of her sentencing, I took the morning off and went to the courthouse. I wanted to see it through. My wife came with me. So did Linda, Robert, and about a dozen other people from the neighborhood. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd clearly read the case file thoroughly. She listened to Patricia's lawyer talk about how his client had devoted years to community service, how she'd made mistakes but didn't deserve prison time, how she'd already been punished enough by losing her position and her reputation. Then the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a victim impact statement. Linda stood up. Her voice shook a little at first, but then grew stronger. "Your Honor, Patricia didn't just steal money from our HOA. She stole our peace of mind." For years I was afraid to plant flowers in my own yard, because I didn't know if she'd decide they were the wrong color. My husband was afraid to wash his car. My grandkids were afraid to play outside when they visited. We paid thousands of dollars in bogus fines because we were too intimidated to fight back. That's not community service. That's tyranny, the judge made notes. Then she looked at Patricia. "Ms. Holbrook, you held a position of trust. People in your community relied on you to manage their money responsibly and to enforce rules fairly. Instead, you used that position to enrich yourself and to harass anyone who questioned you. You drove families out of their homes. You created an atmosphere of fear. And you did it all while claiming to be protecting property values and community standards." Patricia started to say something, but the judge held up her hand. "I've seen a lot of embezzlement cases. Usually the defendant shows some remorse. They admit they made a mistake. They try to make amends. You've done none of that. Even now, you seem to believe you're the victim here. That tells me you still don't understand the harm you've caused." The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison, not the 2 years the prosecutor recommended, 5 years probation after that, full restitution of $78,000 plus interest, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Patricia's face crumbled. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge was done. The bailiff led Patricia away in handcuffs. As she passed our row, she looked at me with pure hatred. I didn't look away. I'd seen that look before from dozens of criminals who thought they'd never get caught. It didn't scare me then, and it didn't scare me now. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Local news had picked up the story. HOA tyrant sentenced to prison was going to be the headline. A reporter asked me for a comment. "I'm just glad justice was served," I said. "And I hope this sends a message that nobody is above the law, not even someone who thinks they're protecting neighborhood standards." "Do you regret moving to Willow Creek?" I thought about it. Not at all. We have wonderful neighbors, and now we have an HOA board that actually serves the community instead of terrorizing it. Life in Willow Creek changed after that. The new board under Robert's leadership focused on actual community building instead of finding violations. They organized neighborhood barbecues. They fixed the playground equipment in the common area that Patricia had ignored, while funneling money to fake companies. They even loosened some of the more ridiculous rules, like the one about what color your mailbox could be. 3 months after Patricia went to prison, I decided to have another garage sale. This time it wasn't about clearing out clutter. It was about making a statement. I posted the notice on the community board. I set up my tables on the driveway exactly where they'd been before. And this time, instead of one angry woman with a tape measure, I got something completely different. Linda showed up with homemade cookies. Robert brought his kids, who set up a lemonade stand. The family that had moved out because of Patricia. They'd moved back after hearing things had changed, and they came by to say hello. By 10 in the morning, my driveway looked less like a garage sale and more like a block party. My daughter sold her old bike to a family with a 7-year-old girl who was so excited she almost cried. The coffee table that I hadn't sold the first time? Bought by a young couple who were new to the neighborhood and nervous about the HOA. I told them they didn't need to worry anymore. We made about $200. But honestly, the money wasn't the point. The point was that we could have a garage sale without fear. We could be neighbors without walking on eggshells. Around noon, an older gentleman I hadn't met before walked up. He'd been watching from across the street. "You're the detective, right? The one who took down Patricia?" "I'm the guy who had a garage sale," I said. Everything else just followed from that. He laughed. "Well, thank you." I was getting ready to move. Couldn't take the constant harassment anymore, but now I think I'll stick around. That night, sitting on our back porch with my wife, I thought about how strange life could be. I'd spent 25 years fighting crime in the city. I'd dealt with murderers, drug dealers, organized crime. I'd seen the worst of humanity. And then I retired to the suburbs and ended up taking down an HOA board member with a tape measure and a clipboard. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said to my wife. "What's that?" "This case will probably be more satisfying than half the cases I worked in my career. Because this time I wasn't just catching a criminal, I was helping people get their lives back. People who were genuinely scared in their own neighborhood. So no regrets about retirement?" "None at all. Though I was hoping for a little less excitement." She laughed. "You're retired from the police department. You're not retired from being you. You'll always stand up when you see something wrong." She was right about that. A few months later, I got a letter from the state HOA regulatory board. They'd used Patricia's case as a catalyst to reform HOA governance laws statewide. Now there were mandatory financial audits, term limits for board members, and stronger protections for residents who filed complaints. They thanked me for bringing the issues to light. I framed that letter and hung it in my garage right next to the original $1,000 fine notice that had started everything. Every time I look at it, I smile. Because it reminds me that justice doesn't always happen in a courtroom or a police station. Sometimes it happens in suburban driveways. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as refusing to be bullied. And sometimes, the biggest criminals are the ones who think they're just enforcing the rules. We've been in Willow Creek for over a year now. Our daughter made the honor roll. My wife joined the book club. I've become the unofficial neighborhood watch guy, except instead of looking for criminals, I mostly just help people program their security cameras and remind teenagers to lock their car doors. Last week, a new family moved in 3 houses down. Young couple, first house, nervous about everything. I walked over with a welcome basket my wife put together. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "If you need anything, just let us know." The husband looked relieved. "We heard there used to be some issues with the HOA." "There were. Not anymore. We've got good people running things now. Just be decent neighbors and you'll be fine." "That's all we want," his wife said.